Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and get back into more X-Force comics, which also means that we got to pick up with X-Force issue number 76 and issue number 77. Now, the only reason why we're covering two issues for today's video is because the next story arc deals with Rainfire, and I kind of feel like that story arc right there should be its own video for down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. And so today, we're only covering two issues that are technically one-shot storylines, but also the first chapter, issue number 76, it really does kind of push a certain storyline forward involving Cannonball, Boom Boom, and also Sunspot. You see, in the 1990s, when it came to Marvel Comics, you had all these different X books, right? But with all these different X books, you also had all these different relationships. You could find at least one relationship going on in each of the X books. Jean Grey and Cyclops, Polaris and Havoc, Captain Britain and Megan, Husk, and also Chamber. But you also had Cannonball and Boom Boom. Now here comes the problem, because in the mid to late 1990s, you had Marvel take Cannonball and push him over to the X-Men, which of course began this whole like rocky road for the relationship, because now these two characters were on two different complete teams. They weren't not really able to see one another because they all had their own missions when it came to being the X-Men and also X-Force. And so with Boom Boom, she kind of felt lonely. She kind of felt like their relationship was no longer going in the right direction. And so in our last story arc, while you had X-Force trying to celebrate at this huge festival, well, she kissed Sunspot, and that is Cannonball's best friend. Now, she forgot that she had invited Cannonball to the big event in our last story arc, except when he arrived, they had just finished kissing. And so they're kind of wondering, like, should they tell him that they had kissed? Here comes the problem, though, because with Cannonball, he kind of feels like he should rejoin X-Force, because with everything going on with the X-Men at this time, he kind of feels like he's more at home with X-Force rather than the X-Men. But the problem is, again, that they still have not told him that they had kissed. And so it's kind of like this big secret until the ending of the first chapter, issue number 76. Now we have to switch over to Domino. Now, when it came to Domino, she was one of the few people that had officially left X-Force behind. And the thing was, back in Operation Zero Tolerance, where you had X-Force get captured, when it came to Domino, one of the commanders who was trying to get revenge against Domino had placed this device on her nervous system in her body, which of course now slowed down her reaction time. And so she's not as fast as she used to be when it came to fighting against different opponents. It also kind of throws off her luck powers as well. And so for Domino, what she's trying to do is get used to the idea of her new reaction time, but also kind of making sure that she'll still be ready for the field anytime she gets attacked. And so what she did was she went over to Hell House. As we all know, Hell House belongs to this guy known as Patch that we have seen in Deadpool comics, where different mercenaries go to collect contracts. And so when it comes to Domino, she got a contract. And that contract is to go after a certain crime lord. Here's a catch though, because to get close to that crime lord, she has to fight through this tournament that's taking place on a boat in the middle of Gulf of Mexico. Once she does win the tournament, she should be able to become this crime lord's personal bodyguard, but in reality, capture him and take him over to whoever hired her to complete the contract. Here comes the problem though. Well, two problems. First, this whole entire underground tournament that does take place on the boat in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, yeah, it's being run by Arcade. As you all know, Arcade loves the idea of building up all of these amusement parks that are basically built to kill people. He's also a mercenary, but right now he's running this underground tournament. Here comes the second problem. Her final opponent is Shatterstar. And so we're kind of left to wonder, how in the world did he get involved in this underground tournament? And we learned that it's because of Richter, his best friend, because we do learn here that when it comes to Arcade, he had kidnapped Richter. So right now, he's forcing Shatterstar to fight against Domino as a way to hopefully free Richter. Now, there is another reason why, and we do learn at the very end of this chapter, but getting back over to Meltdown and also, well, Sunspot, You can clearly see, like, when it comes to Tabitha, aka Meltdown, that she's being very awkward around Cannonball. But the problem is for Cannonball, he's not really able to pick up on the idea of like what's going on between him and also Meltdown. He still feels like their relationship is pretty strong. And so he does kind of continue on but thinking that, but in reality, it does seem like they're about to break up very soon. We can kind of go ahead and shift back over to Domino, who's fighting against Shatterstar. Now, the battle does not really take that long because for Domino, she knows how to fight against Shatterstar because they were teammates over the years. Now, for Shatterstar, he should also be doing the same thing that Domino is doing right now, knowing the moves that she would make to help him win, but he's not doing that. And so for Domino, she's able to remember all the different tricks, but also knows how he fights to allow her the chance to win the battle. Now, once she does win the battle, of course, that means she now wins the tournament, and RK can now allow her to meet the Crime Lord that she's technically here for. And so once she does meet the Crime Lord, she arrests him and takes him away to complete the contract. Now, we also learn like another reason why Shatterstar was forced into this tournament. Arcade is working with Mojo, and let's not forget, when it comes to Shatterstar, he's from the Mojoverse. And so it does seem like for Mojo, he wants to know how Shatterstar is doing on Earth. And to him, it seems like Shatterstar had begun to get a tad bit soft. He's no longer that rough character we saw at the very beginning of X-Force comics. Now, this particular chapter does end on the note where you do see Boom Boom and also Sunspot once again kissing one another, and of course they do get caught by Cannonball. Now, for Cannonball, he wants to know, like, when in the world did it start between them? And of course they do tell him like this all began a while back. Now, when it comes to Cannonball, of course the dude is upset because it's his girlfriend right now kissing his best friend. Like, how else should he possibly feel here? And so with him kind of seeing this, not kind of, he does see it full on, he basically just runs away. He flies off. And so you did have the rest of X-Force kind of wondering like, hey, where in the world Cannonball is going to? And you don't have Sunspot nor Boom Boom inform the rest of the team like, oh, he left because of us. And so now we're kind of left to wonder, how is Cannonball going to deal with the fact that he just lost his girlfriend to his best friend? Now, the next chapter we have to talk about takes place in X-Force issue number 77, and this storyline is called The City of Lost Children. Now, for me personally, I kind of love the title of the storyline, and really, it's not a bad story. It's pretty good for a one-shot storyline, but getting into the opening pages of this one single issue, we pick up with two young children, one known as Mary, the other one known as Johnny. Now, in the opening pages of the storyline, we kind of get the idea these two characters are like very close to one another. But when it comes to Johnny, he is a mutant. So we see Johnny in the opening pages just trying to show Mary his abilities. Now, when we do kind of move on to the next section, it's now 1 week later. And we see the body of Johnny had just been discovered in the middle of the road by the police. Now, we kind of get the idea here that for the police, they don't really care for Johnny because the possibility that he is a mutant. But we also learned that for Johnny, he had disappeared 3 days ago. So the question is now, what happened to Johnny? We also learn here that for Johnny, he's not the first child to disappear, then reappear as a dead body. Now, before we're able to get any kind of answers, we do see a few SHIELD agents arrive out of nowhere to take over the scene of the crime. Now, when it comes to X-Force, they're also in the same town where Johnny is from. And matter of fact, when we do switch over to X-Force, they're inside this diner. And you have one member of X-Force currently reading a newspaper. Now, with this newspaper, it's really more our heroes kind of learn about what exactly happened to Johnny, but also what's been happening to other children in the city as well. Because again, there have been kids who had just disappeared, but then reappear, but they're dead. And the question is right now, how are the children dying? Who's out there possibly killing off the kids? Now, of course, you do have the owner of the diner kind of express that she feels bad what happened to the young boy. But when it comes to the sheriff of the city, he wants our heroes out of the city fast. Now, we also kind of get the idea of the possibility of a tad bit of racism. And the reason why I'm saying that, because for Sunspot, while you do have the rest of X-Force leave the diner to get into the car to continue their road trip, for Sunspot, he has to use the restroom. And you do have a couple of guys follow him into the restroom to commit the idea of racism. But let's go ahead and shift our focus back onto the mystery of the children, because when you do have X-Force reunite in the vehicle, you did have to look at an old map. Now the map is possibly a few years old, but they realize that there is this old nuclear site nearby the town, and Johnny's dead body appeared nearby that site. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering if there is some kind of connection between Johnny and that old nuclear plant site. And so you do have our heroes begin to head over there to figure out what exactly could possibly be going on. Now, we do have to shift over to Mary, because for Mary, we see her right now with her parents at the doctor's office. Now, we do learn here that for Mary, she's been having these headaches. The reason why, because she is a mutant. She has the ability to read other people's minds. And so when it comes to Mary's parents, they were kind of freaking out and took her over to the doctor's office. Now, with them doing that, the doctor really can't explain what's going on with Mary. But he does kind of realize that there's something going on with her and kind of hinting at the possibility that she is a mutant. And so now we kind of get the idea here that every single child that had been disappearing in this town, they were mutants. So now the question is, what's going to happen to Mary? Is she also going to end up dead? In matter of fact, when it comes to Mary, she reads the mind of, I want to say her mother, and her mom's right now freaking out about the idea of the possibility of Mary being a mutant, but also end up dying. And so with that, you have Mary freak out and she leaves the doctor's office without her parents. Now, for the members of X-Force, they went over to where the dead body was found, Johnny's dead body. And so while you do have X-Force trying to figure out what exactly happened to Johnny, well, you didn't have Mary be nearby, and she sees X-Force walking around where her friend's body was found. And she begins to use her ability to read the minds of the different members of X-Force. Now, for Warpath, he kind of realized there's somebody right now trying to enter his mind. Now, when it comes to Bobby and also Tabitha, they did their research. And what I mean by that statement is that they learned that this city was a testing site by the government many years ago, which also means that when it came to the government, you had a generation of people back in the 60s be affected by radiation, which of course then leads into the idea of the birth of mutants inside this town. And so when we do switch over to the rest of X-Force, they're right now trying to figure out who's trying to access their minds. And of course, it is Mary. And so you do have X-Force being able to grab her and technically stop her. But then you have these different SHIELD agents arrive. Now, they recognize Annie Moonstar. And the reason why, because she was part of SHIELD. But anyways, though, you do have Mary kind of freak out to the point where she released a huge amount of energy to send people flying away. And then she, disappears. But this now allows our heroes to have a conversation with Agent Briggs. Now, when it comes to Agent Briggs, he does explain to our heroes about what exactly is going on here in the city. And we learn by him that when it came to the 1960s for this town, it was a government testing site. The problem was that the radiation did affect a few people way back then. But the problem is that now their children are coming out as mutants. Now, most of the kids have supposedly disappeared. And the thing is that SHIELD has been taking them in. When it came to Johnny, it seemed like his powers had killed him. Now, when it comes to Agent Briggs, his main goal is to watch over Mary. Now, technically, the rest of the book, it's really more of us seeing X-Force making sure the town is actually safe. And really, you have Tabitha being able to connect with Mary. And with their connection, because for Tabitha, let's not forget that she had a hard upbringing, she kind of knows that what Mary is going through, the idea of being scared about being a mutant, having those powers, but also knowing how to cope with the idea of becoming a mutant and living in this world. But either way, you have Tabitha being able to bond with Mary. And once you have X-Force confirm, like, hey, she'll be safe here along with S.H.I.E.L.D. watching over her, you didn't have X-Force leave. And so this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.